Hi there, I'm Dr. Leslie Caesar, and today we're going to talk about stress-related migraines. I'm really excited to talk about this topic because it's a topic that is either completely overlooked or people aren't going kind of in-depth enough. If you're prone to migraines, you probably have experienced some migraines where you say, you know what? That was related to stress. The work deadline, the conflict with a coworker, something happening with a child is very stressful, right? Maybe a family member having a severe illness and all of the stress of that, and then boom, you get a migraine, either in the middle of it or shortly thereafter. So a very common phenomenon actually when it comes to stress-related migraines is what is called a letdown migraine, right? So the stressful situation happens, and then once it's done, boom, we crash and we have the migraine sort of after the crisis, after the chaos is over. That's when we get the migraine, and we say, well, how come I felt so good during the worst of it and I didn't crash until it was actually better or the crisis was over? This is all very common, and most people who are prone to migraines have experienced this. I know I certainly have. So I wanted to talk about this today because it's something that when I work with my clients, we actually do a lot of work around, because if you don't work on the mental and emotional component to your migraines, you're only going to get so far. And I know this through my own personal experience with my own recovery from my own chronic migraines. So most practitioners are just working on what I would call the physical side of the body. So definitely when you go into your medical doctor in allopathic medicine, they're giving you a prescription medication. That prescription medication is basically altering your physical biochemistry or your physiology so that you either don't feel the pain, or it's altering your biochemistry enough so that it's sort of squashing the biochemistry that's generating the migraine symptoms. So when you go in and you go into your conventional medical doctor, your allopathic doctor, they're really only thinking about the physical side of your migraines. And even in the natural medicine side, in the alternative medicine industry, most practitioners are also only looking at the physical side of your body. They're just using natural substances instead of drug substances to manipulate your physical biochemistry and physiology. I'm going to be honest with you, that's what most natural practitioners are doing. So it's sort of like just replacing that medication with a natural substance, but they're still trying to manipulate your physical body, your biochemistry, your physiology. There's no test for the mental and emotional component to your migraines. There's no blood test for that. There's no CAT scan. There's no CT scan for that side of the migraines. But again, the vast, overwhelming number of us who have chronic migraines, we have this experience where we know that this one was either all due to stress, or if not 100% due to stress, a significant component to the migraine, sort of the thing that like set us over the edge, was the stress level. So it's very important that if we want to recover from migraines, we address the physical side of the body and the mental and emotional component to ourselves that's contributing to the migraines. Okay, like I say, if we don't do that, we're only going to go so far. It's a recurring theme that I talk about on my podcast as well. So today I wanted to go in a little bit deeper into this, and I actually wanted to use an article that was published on migraine.com that talks about the stress component to migraines, because I think that there are some really interesting pieces to this article. And I think as far as the article goes, I think it's very helpful, but I think we need to go a little bit deeper, okay? So this article on migraine.com was published on August 6th, 2025, and it was written by Eileen Brennan. Now, I don't know her. She shares some personal details here in the article, and this is not at all a commentary on the author. I do not know her. I do not know anything about her other than what she wrote in this article. And so what I'm going to say here as I talk about this is not in any way to make a commentary on her. I'm just using this as a teaching tool. Okay, so anything that I say here is just going to be purely hypothetical. Okay, so she says, productivity was valued more than rest in the house that I grew up in. Laying on the couch to watch TV or read a book was viewed more as lazy than it was a healthy downtime for my body. This created a mindset and a habit in me always to keep busy. Now, this is a very common theme amongst us women who are prone to migraines. So us women who are prone to migraines, we are more on the type A spectrum. Okay, now nobody wants to admit that they're a type A personality, okay, right? But let's be honest with ourselves, right? Those of us who are prone to migraines, we tend to be very driven. We tend to be very productive, very conscientious. If there's somebody that's going to jump up, raise their hand at work and volunteer to do something, we're going to be the one to do it. If there's going to be a mom that's going to volunteer to do the PTA book, book fair, we're going to do it. Okay? We tend to be, like I say, on the perfectionistic side, right? We're going to be hosting a holiday dinner, it's going to be really, the napkins are going to match the table, the placemats and that type of thing. We're going to really top to bottom clean the house. We're going to even take a look at the closets that nobody is even going to go into, but we better tidy those up before people come over for Thanksgiving. We tend to be more like that. And we tend to be the fixers, right? If there's a crisis, I'm there, I'm in there, I'm going to jump in, I'm going to help out, I'm going to get this fixed. Everybody else, there's a crisis, everybody else is on the floor in a fetal position, not knowing what to do. We are going to jump in there and we are going to save the day. We tend to be like this, okay? So what she's describing here right out of the gate is that in the house that she grew up in, right, if you were watching TV or you were reading a book, it was viewed more as lazy, okay? So here we have the introduction of a judgment around what someone is doing, right? We just see someone doing something, here comes a judgment, that's lazy, okay? So she tells us off the bat that this was sort of the mindset in the home that she grew up in, right? It was communicated to her, obviously, by her parents. And so this created a habit, she's calling it a habit, to always keep busy, okay? So, again, this is a recurring theme. Let me know in the comments if you resonate with this description, okay? Then she continues, years later, the idea, let alone the act, of sitting on the couch to watch TV was more anxiety-provoking than appealing. It was so much more uncomfortable for me to sit down than it was restful, right? So I hear this a lot from my clients. I know that I should rest. I know that I should, just sit down for even 10 minutes. My body is telling me it's tired. My back is starting to hurt. But here's the thing, Dr. Leslie, if I sit down, what starts happening is all of this to-do list starts going off in my brain. I'm sitting here, but I got to do this, I got to do this, I got to do this, don't forget about that, how am I going to get this done? So it's not really that restful for me to sit down. It's actually better for me if I just keep going because I got to get these tasks done, okay? So I've heard this more than once. There was always something that could be getting done, but to no surprise, the effects of this eventually caught up to me. So as people realize, right, that they have a difficult time resting, and that they have this, as soon as they sit down, because they're getting that signal that they need to rest, then this to-do list starts to kick off in their mind. Then when they start to realize, this probably I do need to rest, right? They start to develop an awareness that my body does need to rest. Okay, but how do I sit here with this to-do list running? This is very unpleasant. So in this day and age, what do people do? They go to the phone, right? So we have this addictive by design device that we carry with us everywhere, right? I wasn't even planning on showing this to you, but it just was sitting right here on the desk next to me, so I'm like, well, let me pick it up and grab it. What people then will do is they will sit down to rest, but they won't rest. They will go on their phone, okay? And so then they will just scroll through, social media. They'll go on like a solitaire game, right? They will do something on their phone. So that sort of overrides the to-do list that is playing in their mind. They can kind of block that to-do list off. And then they will be physically sitting there and so-called resting, but they're still engaged, right? They have to be engaged with something to turn that list off, right? So this is sort of like the second stage that people will find themselves in, and I hear this a lot, right? Like, I know I need to rest, I'm trying to rest, but I can't listen to that to-do list. That's terrible. So then I find that I'm on my phone, and then before I know it, 35 minutes have gone by, right? And I've just been on my phone looking at these Instagram reels or, whatever it is, right? And then the self-reproach comes in. I can't believe I wasted all this time, right? And then that even becomes a cycle of stress, okay? So let's continue with the article. Again, let me know in the comments if you resonate with this. If it does, you're a typical migraine sufferer, okay? Ask me how I know. So as we continue here with the article, so without rest comes stress. This is the next section. So the body isn't designed to always be in action. It needs rest, right? So again, here's a statement where it's like, yeah, I know, right? If it were that easy, I would have already done it. It's the balance between the two that's known as homeostasis. It's our body's balance between the sympathetic nervous system, which is commonly called the flight or fight system, right? And the parasympathetic nervous system. This is typically called the rest and digest, right? We actually have to digest our food in a parasympathetic state, right? So if we're fleeing from the saber-toothed tiger and we go into that fight or flight mode, that sympathetic nervous system state with the adrenaline and the adrenaline and the cortisol actually shut down our digestive tract because it's like, well, I want to survive. I don't care about the food I just ate and breaking that down right now. I just want to survive the next 15 minutes. And to do that, I'm going to need to put my blood in my muscles and my brain, not in my gut. So the adrenaline and cortisol that are part of that sympathetic nervous system response or fight or flight nervous system response, one of the many actions that it does is actually shut down the digestive tract. Okay, so that's why the parasympathetic nervous system is called the rest and digest, because we can't digest our food if our body thinks it's in like a survival mode, a life or death situation. Then she writes, the body is designed to handle stress. Definitely true. Our body pumps out stress hormones to support the body in handling that moment of stress. It's an innate ability so that we are able to fight or flee a predator that might have attacked us, like that saber-toothed tiger. Thankfully, we don't have to worry about being chased by a lion in the woods as we hunt for dinner, but we do experience an equally scary risk to our health: chronic stress. Okay, so here's the word that we hear all the time, right? Chronic stress. So let's see what she talks about. Let's see what she says about chronic stress. So stress could be physical, mental, or emotional. Absolutely agree with that. I have talked about physical stressors on the podcast, and this is making me think about doing a dedicated episode of physical stressors. So stress can be physical, mental, or emotional. And what's crazy is that the stress doesn't even have to be happening at the moment to have negative effects on our health. We can simply be thinking about past trauma or anxious over a potential stressor in our future, and our body produces the same stress response as if we were experiencing the stress at that very moment, right? So this is where, right, you're anticipating that big presentation that you have to make tomorrow at work at 10 a.m. and then all night long, right, you can't sleep, your heart rate is elevated, you're sweating, your mind is racing, right? You're anticipating the stress of that presentation that you have to give, and so your adrenal glands are pumping out that adrenaline and cortisol, and so generating those symptoms like the elevated heart rate, the sweating, your mind racing, right? You got more blood flow going to your head, your mind is going to be more active. What can happen over time is that if the chronic state of stress becomes our norm, then we become what's called sympathetic dominant, right? So this is where we have this low level, more continuous production of these stress hormones, notably cortisol and adrenaline. And then what she writes is we're never getting to shift into the parasympathetic nervous system where our body can rest, digest, repair, and reset, right? So certainly, when we discuss these types of things, we always talk about them. It's funny, like even when I was giving an example, I gave an example of this like saber-toothed tiger that none of us have ever encountered, but we've read about it, in school when we were learning about, early humans and the Ice Age and so on. So this is what we always use. We live in this like totally modern society now where we're not out, hunting for food or foraging for food and suddenly stumbling upon a bear or, a wildcat or, even a raccoon, right? So we are so outside of the natural environment that we don't really encounter these types of deadly threats. I mean, the closest thing that we would encounter in our modern life is, maybe we're driving our car and somebody turns right in front of us, right, and we almost crash, right? That would be something where it would be like the equivalent of stumbling onto a bear while we were out, gathering food or something like that. So we have these, we will experience those types of really like acute stressors, and then our adrenal glands are going to whoosh, right? They're going to produce this massive spike of adrenaline and cortisol. You can really feel that in that near miss in the car, or, maybe you even get in a car accident, right? I was in a little fender bender. Somebody hit me from behind a couple years ago, and it did dent my fender, but thankfully nobody was injured. It was relatively very minor. But I mean, just the surge of adrenaline and cortisol, right? I could just like feel that for a good, 20 minutes after the fact. So we will experience these like huge surges of adrenaline and cortisol in these really stressful situations. But then we have more of the day-to-day stressors. And certainly, I mean, I wasn't around, right, during the last Ice Age, but I'm sure that they also experienced, stress in their kin group. I'm sure husbands and wives had conflicts in the Ice Age, or, a mother-in-law was, really hard to deal with in the Ice Age, or, some of the ladies got into a conflict with each other around the campfire. I mean, I'm sure that people had the same sort of day-to-day lower levels of stressors that we experience. So when we experience these lower levels of stressors, this is where we have a lower level of adrenaline and cortisol being produced. And while we aren't going to be so acutely aware of this, it's not going to be like when I had that fender bender and for 20 minutes I could just feel the blood and the energy and the panic, right, just coursing through every fiber of my body. We're going to have a subtler effect, a subtler impact from that lower level of adrenaline and cortisol. And what can happen if people are in that type of state all the time or very frequently, we become acclimated to that feeling. right? So it was very, very obvious to me when I got in that fender bender that I was really, upset and knocked out of balance. But if every day I'm going into work and I'm kind of walking into the lion's den, I used to work in corporate America. I had a few work environments over the years where it was like you were walking into the lion's den every day when you walked into work and you really had to be on guard. We're going to have that adrenaline and cortisol. We're going to feel those effects, but it's going to start to feel just like any other day, and we're going to start to get acclimated to it, and then we're really not going to notice it, right? And if somebody said, oh, is it, where you work, is it stressful? It's all right, because we just become acclimated to it. It's just kind of our normal. But like she's saying in the article, if we become acclimated to that, we're not going to even realize that we are not going into that like rest and digest, repair and reset mode, right? When what happens is, okay, that was, I was walking into the lion's den today at work, but it wasn't a full, there weren't 10 lions in the den, there were just one. So that becomes a good day, and we think, oh yeah, this was a good day. I'm actually kind of more in a calmer calmer place, because we get so acclimated to it. So we may think that we're going into that rest and repair stage, but we're still really in that kind of stress. Then she says, the next paragraph here is titled, "Stress makes us vulnerable to migraine attacks." Okay, so let's read here, because now we're really getting into the meat of it here. She writes, aside from countless other health concerns, being more vulnerable to a migraine attack is certainly a risk of this lifestyle. So she's saying that you are going to be more vulnerable to a migraine if your lifestyle consists of this chronic stress state. Okay? So in a way, this is sort of like a statement where we kind of go, yeah, I know, but I have to go to work, right? I have to make a living, and every place has stress, so what do you want me to do, right? It kind of, it's a little bit like, well, okay, yeah, duh, I know, but what am I supposed to do about it? So she continues, for years, this was me. As I mentioned, rest wasn't encouraged as a child, so it created a mindset that I always had to be doing something. Let's dig into this a little bit more. And again, here, I do not know the author. I know absolutely nothing about her other than what she's written in this article, which I have read to you. So this is in no way a commentary about her. I'm just going to use this as like a hypothetical situation, because it really comes up with a lot of women who are prone to migraines, this type of dynamic. So she says, it created a mindset that I always had to be doing something. Let's continue here. So the next paragraph is titled, Stress Makes Us Vulnerable to Migraine Attacks. Okay? Aside from countless other health concerns, being more vulnerable to a migraine attack is certainly a risk of this lifestyle, right? So she's talking about like the chronic stress lifestyle. So this is a statement where it's sort of like, yeah, I know, right? Like, I know I shouldn't, I know I shouldn't be stressed all the time. I know that stress makes my migraines worse, but, I have to work, I have to make a living, right? So it's sort of like one of those statements where it's like, yeah, I know this, but now what, right? She continues, for years this was me. As I mentioned, rest wasn't encouraged as a child, so it created a mindset that I always had to be doing something, right? So we talked about this before. This is it's a common, it's a recurring pattern for those of us women who are prone to migraines. We tend to always have to be doing something, right? So she is, she's saying that because it was considered laziness, right? If you were just kind of resting, watching TV, reading a book, which is even still doing something, right? It created a mindset in her. Okay, so what does this mean, a mindset? Before she called it a habit, right? So Is it a habit? Is it a mindset? Now we're really getting into something here, okay? So let's go through what she says she did to kind of pull herself out of this, either a mindset or a habit. And then I want to kind of break this down a little bit more for you, okay? So the next paragraph is is titled "Allowing Myself to Relax." So she says, I had to be patient with myself as I began unraveling this mindset and put a new belief in its place. I'm not going to lie, the process was really uncomfortable. I had to sit on the couch through moments of anxiety just to get comfortable with the idea of allowing myself to relax. I started with shorter time frames, and over time I found myself fully letting go enough to watch a full movie in one sitting. Okay, so what she did, this is sort of like an exposure therapy, right? So what she did was she would kind of force herself, kind of like willpower, white knuckle her way, and again, I'm presuming this. I do not know her personally, but I'm just kind of inferring this from what she wrote. Kind of force herself to sit on the couch and then let that to-do list kick off, right? Okay, I'm sitting here, but I gotta pick up those toys, and I haven't done the dishwasher yet, and oh my goodness, I gotta get ready all that stuff, get all that stuff ready for the holiday next week, right? So she would let that to-do list kick off, which is anxiety provoking, right? And then she would sit there and let that tape run, and sit there with that anxiety. And she would do that for a short period of time. So she was exposing herself to the anxiety that was generated by letting that to-do list run in her head. And then she would get up, and then I'm presuming that she would go, keep going on her to-do list. And then she would expose herself again. She would sit down on the couch, and then, okay, yeah, still got to pick up those toys. I still got to put that laundry away. I still got to work on that thing for work. I got to check my work emails, right? That list would kick off again, and she would feel the anxiety of it all, and then she would expose herself to that, and she would become more and more comfortable with that list kicking off, right? So it's sort of like an exposure therapy, where we keep exposing ourselves to the thing that's generating the anxiety, and eventually it generates less and less anxiety. That's what it sounds like she did based on what she wrote. And then eventually she was able to watch a full movie in one sitting. And, a lot of people who don't go through this type of thing, they might read that sentence and go, you gotta be kidding me, right? But I have heard this many, many times, right? So if you're going through this, you're not alone. It's a recurring pattern amongst women who are prone to migraines. Not every woman with migraines has a hard time sitting through a movie in one sitting, but a fair number do. I get it. She then says some other things that have helped me over the years may help you, which includes things like yoga, mindful breathing, essential oils, outdoor walks, prayer, reading, right? So again, this is kind of like the common things that are offered to people right now as sort of like, this is how you do self-care, or this is how you relax. And then finally she says, finding a balance. But over time, this sent the message to my body that it can relax. This has helped tremendously in managing migraine and finding better balance and joy in my life as a whole. I still work hard, but I make sure that it's followed by time to rest and recharge, right? So this kind of gives a very high-level overview of her working through what she called the mindset that was laid down when she was a child, that it was lazy to rest, Okay, so I want to go a little bit deeper into this because I'll be honest with you. And you know, this is just a short article on migraine.com. This is not meant to be something that is, you know, an extensive treatise on the topic. But I will tell you the number of clients that I've had that have come to me and said, you know, I know I get migraines. You know, so I know some of my migraines are because I get really stressed out. And I have tried to relax for so long, right? I have done the yoga, right? I go for walks. I do the yoga. I do the meditation. I have a prayer life. I try to sit there and relax. I do the guided meditation, right? They have done all of the things, the essential oils, you know, behind the ears, all this stuff. They have done all of these things, and still they have a very, very difficult time with this. And the reason why is because we really have to get to the bottom of what the mindset is, or the belief. She says, I had to be patient with myself as I began unraveling this mindset and put a new belief in its place. Okay? So what this comes down to is that we form a belief, and that belief is driving our behavior, right? So at the beginning of the article, she said that she had developed a belief due to the family environment that if you rested, you were lazy. Now, that's a surface level understanding of what's going on here. Okay, now lazy, is lazy, you know, if you call somebody lazy, are they going to be happy about that, or are they going to be mad about that, right? Lazy has a judgment associated with that. It's not a compliment to be called lazy, okay? So the underlying belief has about what lazy actually is has to be uncovered here. So there are many people who were communicated that it was lazy to rest. This is not uncommon, but we really want to identify what is the exact flavor, what is the exact meaning, what is the exact belief under that label, that judgment, that kind of insult of being lazy. And if you can identify that, then you are going to be, it's going to be much easier for you to eliminate that belief, and as she says, put a new belief in its place. Okay? So I'm going to throw out a few, again, hypothetical examples. Okay? So for some people, if in the family dynamic, this kind of word lazy is being thrown around, what is actually being communicated? So in some families, what would lazy actually mean? So lazy might mean, in some situations, that you are maybe a worthless person. You're someone that isn't contributing. You're a freeloader. Okay? Let's brainstorm what some deeper definitions of what lazy could be, right? Maybe it's you're a freeloader. You're a taker. You don't care about other people. Maybe you're stupid. You know, maybe you are just sitting around and you're lazy because you don't know how to do anything. You're kind of like, you know, stupid or incompetent. You can't do anything right. Maybe that's what lazy means. In the healing process from this, we want to dig into that deeper definition of what lazy meant within your family dynamic. Because that's really what the belief is that is driving the behavior, right? Because it's one thing, right? It's pretty easy as an adult to go back and say, it was, that kind of lazy, maybe if it was actually said, explicitly said, quit being lazy and get up off the couch, or it was more of a subtle tone, a subtler form of communication that sort of translates to the label of laziness. So as an adult, it's relatively easy to say, yeah, you know what, there was kind of this like lazy label that would be thrown on me if I was sort of caught resting, right? And that's not right. I mean, it doesn't mean you're lazy if you're resting. I mean, look at everything that I do during the day. I mean, I couldn't be lazy given everything that I do. So yeah, it doesn't mean I'm lazy if I sit down on the couch. It's relatively easy as an adult to kind of say that to ourselves consciously. But I'm telling you, for most people, that conscious realization isn't going to be enough, because what's actually under that is a belief that goes deeper, that cuts deeper. So, for example, if under that lazy label what was actually meant is that you're a freeloader, well, gosh, who would want to be a freeloader, right? What are the connotations of a freeloader, right? A taker, selfish, someone who is like a parasite on other people. Like that's a level worse than lazy, right? So we may say, oh yeah, lazy, I can't be lazy. Look at everything that I did today. I deserve to sit down and rest. But if that's not the actual belief, if the actual belief is you're a freeloader, you're a taker, you don't pull your own weight, well, that isn't going to be remedied by just saying, I did all this stuff today, so I can't be lazy. Look at all the evidence that I'm not lazy, so I deserve to rest. You really didn't get to the belief. Because if there's a deeper, unconscious to you belief that you're a freeloader and a taker and a parasite, you're still going to be driven. You're still going to be driven to get up off that couch and, you know what, I got to pick up these toys now. I can't let them sit one more minute. No, you know what, I got to check my email. I got to make sure that something hasn't come in, after dinner, right? You may think you've gotten to the belief, but you really haven't. You have to go a little bit deeper. So I can appreciate that in this article, the author maybe didn't want to go to that level of detail in the article. But I hope that in her own journey, she did go deeper into what the unconscious belief is. I have a feeling she probably did, because she talks about unraveling the mindset and putting a new belief in place. And that is a really important part of many people's migraine healing journey. We have a belief, right? If you have a belief that you are a parasite and a freeloader, I'm sorry, but there's no amount of work, there's no amount of checked to-do boxes, there's no amount of presentation preparation for that work project. You're never going to be able to fill up that hole with your activities, with your actions, with your to-dos, with your accomplishments. If you have a deep unconscious foundational belief that you're a parasite on other people, or that you're a freeloader on other people. So you really have to go deeper and get to the real root of a belief that's lodged there in the unconscious, and then we examine that. Okay? And again, I just sort of brainstormed what would be some reasonable beliefs that are under that lazy label, right? Another belief, right, that wouldn't be uncommon would be, you're incompetent or you're stupid. That's really what lazy meant. And so again, if you just say, yeah, no, I'm not lazy, I deserve to rest, look at everything I did today, but really the belief is that you're incompetent. You're going to be driven. You're going to be driven to prove that belief, right? I don't want to be incompetent. What can I do so that I'm not incompetent, right? And that's going to drive somebody to be that perfectionist, that overachiever. So if you've had a hard time with these sort of tips, right? If you're the person who says, you know what, I have done the mindfulness, I've done the meditation, I've done the yoga, I have sat there and tried to force myself to rest, and nothing seems to be working, it's probably because there's a deeper belief that's unconscious to you, that got laid down, that's driving your behavior, your overachieving behavior, your perfectionist behavior, whatever that is for you. There's an unconscious belief that's driving that. And until we bring that up to the consciousness and really examine it, we are going to be unconsciously driven by that belief. Otherwise, we're just going to be sort of white knuckling our way, trying to willpower our way to change this habit, right? I know I need to rest. I know I shouldn't be so perfectionistic. I know I shouldn't be checking my email at 8 o'clock at night. So we try to white knuckle our way and force ourselves to stop doing that. But again, if you have an unconscious belief that, you're actually incompetent, you're going to check your email at 8 p.m. So this is work that for 90% of my clients we need to do as part of their healing from their chronic migraines. It's a very, very common component, not necessarily lazy, but I think this is a good example. And so if you have been sort of trying everything and still feeling like you have to willpower your way or white knuckle your way through this, this is an area that I have dedicated a tremendous amount of my study and practice to really help my clients get to the actual root of what's driving their behavior. Because the reason why all of this sets us up for migraines is because we are draining our vitality because of our inability to rest, our perfectionism, our always doing things, right? We are draining our vitality, and that is what is actually setting us up for the migraine. So I'm not going to go into this aspect in detail on this podcast because I talk about this in other areas. But it's interesting to me because in this article, she says, stress makes us vulnerable to migraine attacks. Well, why is that? This comes down to what I call the third principle to restoring and maintaining our health. We have to restore our resiliency and vitality. And when we are trapped in behavior that is being driven by a false unconscious belief, we are going to drain our vitality. It's like we have a vitality bucket, but we got a hole in the bottom of the bucket. That hole is generated by this false belief, and we just drain our vitality out, and then we are overly susceptible to what we call migraine triggers. This is why it's critical to work on these areas, because we don't want to drain our vitality. We want to identify the root of these false beliefs and sort of plug up that hole in the bottom of our vitality bucket and stop draining our vitality. And then what do you know? I've got more resiliency and vitality so that I can go out in the sun for a couple hours and not get a migraine headache. Wouldn't that be nice? So what people don't realize is we want to call it, their perfectionism is actually contributing to their light sensitivity, okay? So we're going to talk about this on other podcasts. I do talk about it in some of the free training that I have and some of the other podcasts that I've done, which we will link to in this podcast. But hopefully this starts to tie some of these pieces together for you, and you can start to make some of those connections. So let me know in the comments, one, if this, not being able to rest and just, feeling that anxiety, that to-do list, checkbox anxiety spring up whenever you do try to rest. Let me know in the comments if that resonates for you. And then also, have you tried all of these little tips and tricks and still having a hard time? Yeah, I get it, right? It's because there's something deeper that you have not brought to consciousness yet, so that you can examine it and we can reset that belief. So thanks so much for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed it. I really enjoyed talking to you. Check out the description box for more information, and we'll see you on the next one.